When you start thinking about putting your house on the market, there are a few critical things that you must do at the very beginning of the process. And that is figuring out how much your house is actually worth and how to properly prepare your house for the market. And doing those two things before you even pick up the phone to call your real estate agent will save you time and money when you ultimately sell your house. Now, before I show you how to figure out what your home value is, there's a few things I want to touch on. And the first thing is you may be asking, why is this even important? Isn't this the agent's job to come with comps and data and experiential knowledge to tell me what my home is worth? And yes, that can be true, but I also believe in the homeowner advocating for themselves and knowing this information before the agent even walks through the door. You don't know necessarily until you go through the interview process, the full interview process with an agent, what type of agent. I talk a lot on this channel about the 20% agents and the 80% agents, and that the 20% of the agents are the skilled, highly skilled, experienced agents, and 80% are not. And you don't know if you have an 80% agent until you go through the process. And I think it's important for you to know as a homeowner exactly what's happening in your neighborhood. If that agent starts bringing in comps that are outside your neighborhood and you know that there are comparable properties inside the neighborhood, you are equipped to question those comps. And then on the flip side, they may have comps that are the same as your comps, but you have questions on those comps and you already have had a chance to digest that information so that you're ready with your questions. So I think it's good to do your homework first before you call a real estate agent, before you have them come in your home for a pre-inspection to start the process. You want to do this step first. Now, the other thing that I want to touch on is that the buyer sets the market value. This is a hard concept for most homeowners to digest. And they say, well, gosh, it's my house. I'm going to determine what the value is. I'm going to say this is what I want for the house, whether it's you want this particular amount of money or you need this particular amount of money. And in a perfect world, that would be true, but in reality, that is not the way it works, because the reality of it is that the home is only worth what the buyer is willing to pay. You could have a home that maybe you think it's worth $1 million, but on the open market, a buyer or a collection of buyers, multiple buyers, say it's only worth $800,000. Now, is that home really worth $1 million? It's not real money unless you have someone with money in their hand giving you that money. And if they're only willing to give you $800,000, that's what sets the market. So it is a mindset shift to try to understand, and that's the reason why we go through this process. Ultimately, we're trying to figure out not necessarily what the house valuation, what you think the valuation is, but rather what the buyer will pay. And so we go through this history to figure out what other buyers have paid for other homes, and then we take that information and apply it to your home. So how do you do that? Well, my recommendation for you would be to jump on Zillow. I think Zillow does have a great data set of information. In most states, they'll give you the sold properties. I understand that in some states, this might be a challenge. Texas in particular, they don't publish at the moment. They don't publish the sold prices readily available on Zillow. You may have to go to another website to get that information. The Registry of Deeds, that is public information. You can go through that avenue. It's a little bit more tedious to go through it that way. But for those states that have available information, sold data on Zillow, this is a great way to go. So if we jump over to Zillow, the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to zoom in on your neighborhood, or if you don't live in a neighborhood, you want to stay within a 1 mile radius, preferably, of your home. Typically, appraisers are going to look in a 1 mile radius, and then they'll work out from that 1 mile if necessary, if there aren't enough comparable properties. So I've pulled up my hometown in Plymouth, a neighborhood in my area that has some properties that have closed over the last 6 months. And here's what I want you to set for parameters. At the very top, you want to pull down this parameter to make sure that you unselect for sale and for rent. You want to make sure that sold is selected. The reason being is the difference between for sale and sold. For sale is projected. There are properties that will never be sold. A homeowner who doesn't necessarily pay attention to the valuation or has misguided information may put the property on, happens all the time, for a price higher than it's actually going to sell. So you can't rely on that for data. Just because your neighbor down the street has their house on for $1 million and the data, the sold data on your house says 800, does not mean you should price your home at $1 million to be competitive, because ultimately that house isn't sold. Their house may go unsold for months, so won't yours. So it's not reliable data. So we want to make sure that we only look at the sold data. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that that is selected. The next thing I want you to do is go over to this More tab, pull that down, and make sure that we've got a time frame no more than 6 months. So you scroll down here, sold in the last, and I typically always go 6 months. The more recent, the better, especially in a market that is changing quickly. If you live in a neighborhood where home values are dropping very significantly in a very, very fast time frame, then you want to make sure that you select something that is a little bit sooner. But I would not go out anything more than 6 months. So we've got that selected, and now you're going to have a property list, a group of properties that is good comparable sold data. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go into each of these properties and look at specific characteristics and features. But before you do that, what I want you to do is I want you to start a spreadsheet. Now, I've created a spreadsheet, and I'm happy to share that with you. The link will be down in the description. But we're going to look at this spreadsheet for tracking this data. Now, this spreadsheet is basically just to get all your information down on paper. So you'll enter your information for your particular home, how big it is, the square footage. On the square footage, you want to look at finished square footage only. Preferably the first floor, second floor. If you have a basement and that basement is finished, I would only include the area that is finished. That is typically the way square footage is tracked. So you want to make sure that that is the proper amount of information. If you don't know what your square footage is, your town records will have that information. Most towns have it online, but you'll be able to get that information from that. And honestly, Zillow will have that. If you pull up your own home, a lot of this information, depending on when you purchase the home, will be on Zillow. Number of bedrooms, bath. This drop down is just the garage. What type of garage? You have a one car attached versus detached. They are valued differently. You want to make sure you get that in there, your lot size. Now, the condition is going to be as it compares to your property. Is the comparable property that you're looking at better, equal, or inferior to your property? Overall, in other words, what's the overall condition? Does it have a lot of updates that yours doesn't, or if it needs a lot of updates that yours doesn't? So you want to check that based on how it compares to your property. The basement, you want to make sure that that is checked off, whether it's finished or unfinished, and then on the features, you're looking at the high ticket features. This can be a little tricky. This is where the experience from an agent will help you determine in your area what is of value. Swimming pools. Swimming pools, if you're in the Northeast, a swimming pool typically is not going to carry a lot of value. If you live in the southern states, it is going to carry a lot of value. So you want to look at what in your area makes sense and at least track that information. You're not going to be adding value, subtracting value. That's what the agent will help you with in determining, but at least you'll get some comparison to know how it compares to other properties. And then lastly, if you live in an HOA, if you're looking at other properties in HOA, or if there's any other amenities, a clubhouse down the street, or if you live near a park or conservation area or anything noteworthy that might set your house apart from the others. So you want to start tracking all of this information as you go through these listings. But the address, the date it was sold, the sold price, and you're going to have a list readily available. Now, this list is what is going to be critical. It's going to be helpful when you sit down with your agent to know, ask questions. And you might even add another column. I might add that actually in here, questions to ask. Things that you may need a little bit more information on, whether you're unclear about and whatnot. So start tracking this information so you can see it side by side. You want to start going through these listings and start with the homes that are closest to your home and work your way out. And as you're going through these homes, you want to look at all that information, put it on the spreadsheet. When it was sold, make sure you track the sold price, not the Zestimate. That's just an algorithm price. You want to make sure you get the actual sold price. And just by the way, if you see a sold price and a Zestimate price that is higher, this is just an algorithm price. This does not mean that this homeowner all of a sudden has $3,400 in home equity. It's just an algorithm price, and they're going to be higher and they're going to be lower. So you want to make sure that you get that sold price. You want to look at the date that it was sold. The more recent, the better, because again, we're trying to figure out what a buyer would be willing to pay for your house. And then you're going to start tracking all the information, and Zillow does a pretty good job with giving you information on the house. It's all connected to the multiple listing services. So any information that the agent entered into their multiple listing will be on Zillow. So you'll see all of this information on, the details about what type of amenities it has and updates and upgrades. And you want to make sure you track all that to see what might be, pertinent for your neighborhood compared to your house. You want to look at, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, the total square footage, the garage space, the total yard, the lot size, and if there are any elements that are specific to your area of the country. If there's some specific areas, like if having air conditioning is a big feature, and for some reason that comp does not and yours has it, or vice versa, that would be something that I would track. Not every home in Massachusetts has air conditioning. It's not as common, so it's something that is a value add, but it's not something that we expect on every single listing. So you want to go through and track all of this information, get it down on that spreadsheet. But while you're doing that, I also want you to pay attention to how the house is presented. And what I mean by that, and we'll get into this a little bit more in detail later, but you want to pay attention to the pictures and what is actually going on in these pictures, how the house is staged, what angles are these pictures taken from? Are they taken from an iPhone? Are they taken actual professional grade pictures? You want to see what the lighting is. And you'll notice, like on this home, everything is off the counters. This is a lived-in home, but it's been depersonalized. Again, we're going to get into that in a little bit. It's been depersonalized in a big way, and that will help sell a house. I understand that you still have to live there, but it does help when you're looking at a picture online, and that's what the goal is. You want to make it so that people can actually envision themselves in their home, in your home. So that is important. So you want to make note on some of these comparable properties, because will a home sell faster and for more money if it looks inviting online with the pictures? Yes, because this is technically their first showing. Back in the day, you saw it maybe in a magazine, or you saw maybe one or two pictures online, and you actually didn't get a sense of what the house looked like until you were in the house in person. But due to technology with high resolution pictures and video and 360 tour, many homeowners are coming in. When they come in to actually view your home, it's actually considered a second showing because they've already seen the house online. And if it has a good representation online, you're off to the races. So you want to pay attention to, that, because that sometimes will tie into why a house hasn't sold, or maybe it was on the market for an extended period of time. And you also want to look at the marketing history. When was it listed? Did it have any price changes? When did it go under agreement? When was it sold? And all of that information is on Zillow. So we can see that this house was listed in May 28th. It went under agreement in literally 6 days, so which means the house was priced properly. 100% priced properly. Now, if you see a house that was listed and then maybe had 2 or 3 price changes, yes, it might be a market situation. But if you are pricing it properly for the market that you're in at that moment, then, which means you might have to take some comparable properties and adjust, which is something that we need to do. If you don't have any very recent comparable properties that have sold, then we need to adjust those for today. House sold 2 months ago, that was in your neighborhood, that was very similar. The home is very similar to yours, but it sold 2 months ago. In the last 2 months, the market has shifted, which means now we have to take that. We can't take it at face value. We actually have to take that and say, okay, the market is actually shifted downward. So we're going to assume that a buyer would actually pay less for your house today. And that's the big thing, that a good agent will help you decipher this data, but you need to know, I really want you to know this information up front. Coming into a listing appointment with an agent already informed about this information is going to set the tone for the agent. And they will either rise to the occasion, or you're going to be showing them the front door. Now, it's important to note that not all features, not all repairs and updates are going to add value. And just because you replace the furnace and you live in the Northeast doesn't mean that that $15,000 or $20,000 on that new furnace system makes your house $20,000 more in value. Ultimately, in a situation like that, a home in the Northeast, it's expected that every home will have heat. So yours having a newer heating system adds a little bit of value, but it's not going to give you 100% return on investment, or ROI. So when you're looking at these listings, that's why you want to note the different features. If there's a home that is in your neighborhood that's very similar to yours, and you have a brand new heating system or a brand new septic sewer system, and theirs does not, does it mean that you could have a little bit higher market value? Marginally. I think that that's where you would lean on an agent to figure out exactly what the buyers are looking for. But that would be one thing that I would be careful with adding value based on when any updates and repairs that you've done around the house. Now, once you have all this information, you can go ahead and call your real estate agent, start interviewing. And I always recommend interviewing at least 3 agents. You want to do your due diligence, even if an agent has been referred to you by a friend or family member, or it's an agent that you've used in the past. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a very wise decision to interview at least 3 agents. In my opinion, oftentimes I see this day in and day out, that you don't know what you don't know. In other words, you may have had an experience, a good experience with an agent, but that agent may be in what I call an 80% agent. They're nice and they're caring and they take care of you, but they may not have the expertise to get that house sold a little faster, or get it sold with a little bit less money or a little bit less headache on the buyer side. Now, if you don't have 3 agents to interview, I do have a preferred partner list that I have personally vetted out over the last 28 years, a list of the top 20% agents in the country. Just click the link in the description below. I will send you an email with some additional questions so I can find out exactly what your needs are, and then I'll connect you with one of my top 20% agents. Okay, now let's talk about preparing your home for sale. And yes, when you meet with your real estate agent, they're going to give you, hopefully, if it's a 20% agent, they'll give you some guidance and advice on what not to do, what you can do, how you can improve your particular property to put it in the best light possible to attract as many buyers as possible. But there are a few things that you should do before that. And the first thing is to adjust your mindset. Now, this is hard. I will tell you, this is probably one of the harder things to do. And what I mean by adjusting your mindset is that you want to turn your home into a house on the market. It is hard having strangers come through your home, having strangers tell you that they don't like your house, they don't like your decor, they don't like your choices in bathroom renovation. It literally is like somebody is telling you your baby is ugly. It is hard to hear that information. But the thing that you want to try to get your mindset in is that this is no longer going to be your home. You are trying to put this as a house on the market so that a buyer can turn it into their home. And I think if you can do that before you start the process, and it helps disconnect you from the home. It helps you get into that mode of all the things that I'm going to tell you next and what you should be doing to get the house ready. And it makes it a little bit easier when you start having showings and you have people start walking through your home. It helps that process, makes it a little bit less stressful along the way. Now, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to start decluttering and depersonalizing. Now, I did an entire video about that. You can check that out here. But ultimately, you want to go through the process of not only mentally moving out of your home, but physically moving out of your home. Now, that does not mean packing everything up and moving out of your home before the house goes on the market, unless you're able to do that. For most people, that's not the case. But what it does do, and what that does mean, is that when you are transforming your home into a house, that means you need to start removing some of the things that make it your home. So you start taking the personal things off the refrigerator. You start putting the personal things that you have on the counter, those conveniences, those everyday conveniences, you want to put those away. Now, yes, this is going to be inconvenient. You're going to be packing away things that you use on an everyday basis, and it's not going to be necessarily a fun thing. You start looking for things. However, if you are committed to moving, if you're committed to moving and selling your home, you need to pack anyways. Get a jump start on it. The more you pack now, the less you'll have to pack later. And not only that, but it'll put the home in its best light possible. Now, again, your agent will help you with this in terms of what you need to do, because you don't want to pack everything. You don't want to make the house sterile, but certain items. The front of the refrigerator is a big one, the kitchen countertops, your nightstand, that type of thing. But you want to start packing those things up immediately. Start as early as you possibly can. Give yourself as much time as possible, because it will help the process go a lot easier. And then once you're done with that, you want to do some deep cleaning. Now, you can certainly hire companies to come in and do the deep cleaning right before the house goes on the market, or you can take that on. And deep cleaning would be things that you're not necessarily doing on an everyday basis. Things like clean the windows. It's amazing how much light will be let into the house with clean windows. And that's one of those things, admittedly, I'm that way, that it's just like, oh gosh, I got to clean the windows. It's a pain. Especially if you have a lot of windows. But believe me, it makes a difference. You want to focus on the entry area, the key areas. So if you have on the front of your house and you have any type of overhang, clear all the spider webs, clear any debris, anything that may be around the front of the house that affects the first impressions of a buyer. You only get one chance at a first impression. And yes, it will be done before you have professional photos taken, but when those buyers come and see that home for the first time in person, you want to make sure you have it in the best possible light. So focus on the front entry. You want to focus on the high traffic items, anything that is, noticeable to a buyer when they're walking through the house. Things like fingerprints, if you have smaller children or grandchildren, fingerprints on the walls. Magic eraser is your friend. Go to Costco, buy a big old box of magic erasers. Those things are amazing. If you need to deep clean your carpet, wait until your right goes on the market and then have a company come in and steam your carpet, or rent a steam cleaner, get that cleaned. But things like cleaning grout in the bathroom, all those things that maybe you let go because you're busy, but you really want to pay attention to that detail, again, because now you want to present it in the best possible light to the buyer. The other thing that you may want to focus on are repairs and updates. Now, when you're going through your home and you're decluttering, you're packing, you're doing some cleaning, you may notice some trim that is rotted, or something that needs to be fixed or replaced, or some deferred maintenance. Now, I always try to look at the home as a whole. And this, I think, is really where a skilled agent can offer some advice, because if you have a lot of deferred maintenance, it may not make sense to make any repairs or updates. The last thing you want to do is spend money and time on something that does not either A, help the house sell for more money, or B, help the house sell faster. One of those two things. If it does not achieve that, then it is not worth spending the time or the money to do. So get some guidance from your agent. If you know that you have some deferred maintenance on things like you live in an area that needs air conditioning and the air conditioning does not work, and you're in a position to fix it, it makes sense to fix it, have that done. Oftentimes I recommend doing a pre-list inspection where you actually have a home inspector come through the house and do an actual inspection with a list. I think that it's important to know upfront, before you have a home inspection from a buyer, what all those items are, and especially from a disclosure standpoint, because if there are any items that come up on that pre-inspection that you weren't aware of, now it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, listen, we didn't realize that the air conditioning wasn't working properly. The weather's chilly right now, and all of a sudden the air conditioning doesn't work properly. There's something wrong with it, and you're not in a position to fix the air conditioning. Financially, you don't want to get into it, or you don't want to. You just simply don't want to bother. You're too busy. You don't want to deal with it. Then at that point, you can disclose it up front to the buyer. So it's not a negotiation issue when the buyer does have an inspection. So you want to go through and focus on the repair items, the maintenance items, and you also can look at what your low-cost home improvements might be. Maybe a coat of paint will help brighten up that living room. Maybe some new light fixtures that haven't been updated in 30 years. Those types of things don't cost a lot of money, and if it's within your realm to do it, it may help your home sell faster. Now I want to touch on home staging. I do not believe every single home needs professional staging. I think most homes can get by with staging with what they have. You have a home that you've lived in, maybe you have a little bit too much furniture in the living room. Maybe you have some furniture that has seen better days. Move some of the furniture out, get some chair covers. There are ways to stage a home so that it is inviting to a buyer and welcoming to a buyer without spending money. I do not believe you need to hire a professional stager in every case. And some homes, if you're selling a home that is a home that needs work, the house is discounted because it has a lot of deferred maintenance, staging is not going to help you sell your house any faster. That being said, I think it's important to walk through your home. Try to put yourself in the buyer's shoes. Oftentimes, asking a friend to come over, your real estate agent should be able to help you with this, but having an outside party, have your friend come over, pretend they're the buyer, and look at the traffic pattern. Do you have too many tables in the front entry? Do you have too many tables in the hallway? Does it feel cramped? Does it feel too personal? Do you maybe have some empty areas where you have positioned the living room for your ultimate TV viewing experience, but the floor plan really doesn't flow when you're walking through the house? That would be staging. Setting up the home for the best possible viewer experience for the buyer with using what you have to work with is the best scenario. Now, if you have an empty home, if you are buying first, selling second, your house will be empty, then you could either have a professional staging company come in or do virtual staging. There are a ton of great virtual staging companies. I use one myself all the time that do a phenomenal job. I do disclose it in the listing that it is virtually staged, but it'll give you that option without the added huge expense of in-person staging. So it's just something to take into consideration with your particular home. Now, after you've gone through all these steps, the most important thing that you can possibly do before you list the house is to have high quality photos taken. Now, most real estate agents have professional photographers that they will bring in to take care of this, but you want to make sure you ask that question because a buyer is not even going to come into the house if your pictures are lousy online. You want to make sure you have professional grade photos with the professional grade perspective of the photos. Having a photo of the camera being too high up so it's looking down on the room or too low so it's looking up and all you can see is the top lip of the kitchen island, it doesn't work. It's not inviting. You can spend hours and hours and hours cleaning and decluttering and depersonalizing. And then if you have lousy photos, game over. You want to make sure you have great photos. And then in addition to that, I'm a big believer of 360 tour, interactive floor plans, video, aerial photos, aerial video. These are all things in this day and age you should expect from your real estate agent when you list your house. Now, as you go through this list, you'll create a punch list, and that punch list will be in line with what your goals are and what's important to you to make sure you don't spend money and time on things that won't help the house sell faster and for more money. But along the way, there are certain things that you still need to remove regardless of what your situation is. Now, I did an entire video about this, and you're going to want to check that out here. I'm Sylvester, and I'm here to help you be a savvy home seller.